to Crafted and Creative, a podcast meant to uplift and engage BIPOC creatives who are on their journey of making a social impact and creating a lasting legacy. The show's mission is to create community and a sense of guidance for those that are looking to do the same through their artistry. Today's guest is Raven Irabor. She is a Pan-African image maker, director, and curator based between New York City and Los Angeles. Her work celebrates the beauty, complexity, and imagination of the African diaspora, weaving together fashion, movement, and storytelling to inspire reflection and connection. Raised in the Bronx by Trinidadian and Nigerian parents, Raven draws from her multicultural roots to create visuals that feel both personal and expansive. Her directing portfolio includes projects for Meta, Complex, InStyle Magazine, The Folklore, McDonald's, and Blavity, with her debut music video featured on Girl in Film. As a producer, she has led projects for Apple, Farfetched, and Food Network in her acclaimed web series, Leah the Late Bloomer, which was named one of the best Black web series of 2019 by Shadow and Act. And this is just a few credits amongst many more credits and accolades. Thank you so much, Raven, for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, and just an honorable mention, me and Raven did a directing workshop. Was that 2021? It was over at Billboard.
No, it was like 2024 because that's when I moved
24?
back to New York. Yeah.
24. Oh my gosh, what is time? After the pandemic, I have no no concept of time. So I got to see a little glimpse of your work, and honestly, I'm such a fan. Like going through all of the work that you've put out there, it's absolutely mwah. So I'm super excited for this conversation.
I
So just to
appreciate
get it started, how did you get into filmmaking and creative direction and being this artist we know today?
Yeah, I feel like it's been a natural like progression. I grew up as a dancer, so that's a lot of why like movement is part of my work as a visual artist and a director. And then I took the more like traditional path of like I went to school for television, radio, and film. So I went to school for production. I went to Syracuse University. And I had a concentration in fashion and beauty communications and double minored in marketing and African American studies. So I feel like not everyone who goes to college ends up merging the work that they studied in college and it translates to their like real like post-college life. But all of those things did actually come together and like impact what I do now after college. But
It's so
yeah,
evident. It's so evident. It's like
Thank you.
jumping off the screen, all of
Yeah,
the
it's like, oh,
things
this
that you
makes
can do.
sense.
Yeah, it
On
really
brand.
does. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Um, but yeah, after that, what's interesting is like in school. So television, radio, and film is the biggest major in a Newhouse, which is School of Public Communications at Syracuse. And I was one of maybe four Black people
Mhm.
um, in that major. So during the time, I didn't really like lean into being a director. I felt like I'm going to go in the producing track because everybody came in knowing all these big directors, and I came in knowing like music video directors. Like that was like my knowledge of directing, and I didn't really feel comfortable proclaiming that at the time. So I was like, I'm gonna go into producing. I'm very organized. I like to like know all the ins and outs of a project. So I pretty much focused on the producing track, but on the side, me and my best friend had our own like production company in New York City. So in the summertime, we would come back to the city and interview underground hip hop artists. So that was kind of like my creative outlet in I guess producing videos and directing videos in a way that like spoke to the things that me and my friends and the culture and community that we was around like was interested in. And then yeah, when I graduated college, essentially I got into a program called Scope of Work in New York City, which helped people of color from the ages of like 18 to 24 get into the creative industry. And going through that program really allowed me to start thinking about what my um I guess visual style would be, what my perspective would be, and expose me to different kind of roles in that, like the creative industry. So I started building my portfolio on the side. So I was working at Scripps Network, which is how I got into like Food Network, Cooking Channel, was doing that kind of work full time. But on the side, building my portfolio as a creative director, like shadowing different like magazines, doing shoots in the city that was specifically more like fashion leaning,
Mhm.
and building my portfolio and my style that way. That was like when Petra Collins like first was becoming popular and like she was doing all these major Gucci campaigns. And the big thing that I noticed was like she has a very distinct style that all these different brands are going after. So it's important what I noticed was like important for me to hone in on what is my like visual style, what is my storytelling style, and those brands will come to me, these fashion brands will come to me for my perspective and for my style versus the other way around. So that's essentially how I started building my portfolio and kind of took like the somewhat like traditional realm. I ended up moving to LA for 6 years and working in production in the media and advertising industry in LA, building my portfolio, and then in LA got really closer into the art world. So I started art curating and all the things. And it's a long story, but that's kind of like top level how the foundation of like how I got to where I am.
Whew, wow, what a journey. What a journey. And awesome journey it's been. That's very incredible that you've been able to bridge this huge gap of careers and build it to make who you are and the type of art and the type of lens scope that you have for creating work. Now, you've worked with a lot of brands, doing a lot of visual storytelling. Now, when a brand is coming to you and wanting you to help tell this story or to help promote this product. Is the visuals, do they come first for you, or are you necessarily thinking about the narrative and the why of the campaign?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it does depend. So I do still work in corporate America and I work doing like advertising and brand partnerships. So and when it comes to that kind of work, um is really understanding like what the brand's, I guess, marketing objectives are, business objectives are, what are they trying to do with this campaign and why they're coming to us, whether it's, the company I work for or for my own company, Race Studios, why are they coming to us? What is like our unique perspective that we kind of like merge that gap for them? So the strategy, I think, is like the first thing when it comes to branded work for me. Um and then I'm a very visual person, so then the visuals tend to come next. Like I do a lot of like visual research um to kind of figure out, okay, what do I want this to look like? And simultaneously the story kind of comes in as I'm doing the visual research. But yeah, it's usually like understanding like the business objectives, the marketing objectives, the strategy and the insights there. And then like once I get a clear understanding of that and kind of like make sure that me and the client are aligned with what those are, I can kind of go off with like the visuals.
Mm. Is that the same for your personal work? You have your web series, Leah the Late Bloomer. You have your film that we're going to talk about later, She Island. Was that something, the visuals coming to you again? I know sometimes as a filmmaker, I might, be walking down the street and see like a image of a father holding his son's hand and think like, oh, that's such a beautiful capture moment. That could be something, and then develop dialogue from there. Or sometimes a piece of dialogue may come to me. Is that how you work also in your personal work outside of branding work?
My personal work is definitely a different process because obviously I don't really have a brand that I need to understand their marketing objectives. So it really is coming from a place of like art for art's sake and what I want to tell and what like came to me. I'm a person that like when it comes to my personal work, I don't really, unless I'm doing something for my portfolio, which is like a different agenda, a different like purpose. But if it's like I want to create something, I want to make something like, my film. I let those ideas come to me. I don't really force myself to create if I don't have anything to say.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, for when it comes to my personal work, I think I'm a like more conceptual artist. So the top level concept will come to me first, and then the visuals, and then the story. And the visuals and the story continue to progress as, creative development and pre-production happens. The concept usually remains the same, but the visual direction and the story like usually progresses as I'm like further doing research. I do a lot of research, whether it's like and I'm a cultural storytellers. Even at my job, like it's a lot of like understanding the cultural zeitgeist, sometimes diving deep into a culture that I'm not really, that's not my background, right? Like looking into like Mexican culture, Puerto Rican culture, and like wanting to make sure that I'm like pulling from something that's authentic and not just like cliche. So similarly with my work, it's like doing a lot of research on whatever topic that I am wanting to explore. And usually it has something to do with like fashion and adornment and like mysticism and folklore and whatever else have you. So like in understanding how those cultures utilizes adornment and folklore and movement and all those things to like push their culture along or to tell stories within said culture. Like those are the things that I am particularly interested in. So with that research, like I'm usually again gathering images, gathering different perspectives that would help fine tune whatever the story and the visuals are.
I love that. You also mentioned being only the one of four in your college program, Black person in your program. And we know in terms of like across genres, across uh, careers that it's very white focused, very Eurocentric, and the way that lighting is set up to only light white people a certain way and not light Black people. Did you feel like you had to find a way to center your Blackness through all of that and through discovering your filmmaking style?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I feel like um in school when it came to the let's say industry leaders that we were learning about, whether they were like directors, writers, producers, definitely very white leaning that we were like informed of. So it required, but also realizing like what I naturally consume. Like I just naturally consume like Black art. So even if you're not teaching it to me, I'm educating myself because this is something that I'm like interested in.
Mhm.
And luckily I was born in the era where like the digital world exists. So like I can just go on YouTube and find out about different Black directors, Caribbean directors, African directors, and like learn about their process and things of that nature. So I think that's like definitely a great blessing to be like born in a time period where you do have access to information where if you're like school is not teaching you something about your own culture that you can kind of like go out and like find that information yourself.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's definitely I also feel like I'm lucky that a lot of the jobs that I've had have been jobs that was open to telling stories of different cultural backgrounds. Like even when I worked at Scripps Networks, and again, that was like Cooking Channel, HGTV, Food Network. Like the reason I remember my boss at the time saying that she like hired me, and I was the last person that she interviewed. I think I like reached out to them very last minute for this job. And it was because like I felt like food was a gateway to learning about different cultures and like learning about like again different backgrounds and things of that nature versus like the beautiful aesthetics of food. So it's like, yeah, even though it's food, you can still dive into like learning about how that food like, is important to that culture, where these roots come from. Like if we're thinking about like, in Puerto Rican Dominican culture, like mofongo and mangú, like if you go back, like that plantain or plantain came from Africa. So like learning about things like that through food is
Mhm.
interesting to me. So I've been grateful whether or not my job was cognizant of it. I like use whatever topic that we did to like have a cultural meaning for myself. And then I also worked at places like Blavity, which is like the Black owned. And I worked at like a Black owned fashion company. And so
Mhm.
throughout my career, I also have been like um I think cognizant and just also
Mhm.
lucky that we are in a time period where there are Black owned or woman owned businesses that you
Mhm.
can like lean into to learn and about different cultures and tell stories in a way and like people and have styling and all these things
Mhm.
that feel like, that makes sense for the talent on screen, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think we're
yeah.
definitely blessed during this time to have people like Ryan Coogler and, Ava DuVernay, these people that we could learn from and watch from, because unfortunately a lot of these schools still are way behind. I went to a drama program where, a lot of conversations about, well, can Black actors be method? Can we do the thing that all of these white people in Russia did back in the early 1900s? Is that something that's really applicable to Black bodies? So that's really dope that you leaned into what we have around us now.
And one,
Um,
sorry, I just want to add to that I feel like people don't realize like because mainstream media acts like Black people have never done this, people assume that like, oh, this is the first time. Like Black people are not new to the planet, right? Like we have
right.
been doing these things for forever and then now it's getting exposure. But like, before Hollywood, like black people on the continent in the Caribbean have probably been doing method acting. They have been doing all these things. And
Mhm.
sometimes it feels like, in the media or even in like our own conversations as like black creatives, we're like, I've never seen a black person do XYZ. And it's like
Mhm.
that is impossible. Black people have been on the planet for forever. It requires us to do deeper research because maybe it's not,
It's
from an
not framed in
education.
the same way.
Yeah, it's not framed and we're not like informed about it, right? So it does require you to do deeper research, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So even for ourselves, like I'm cognizant of like reframing how I'm talking about it because it's like,
We've been
if
here,
you're
like you said. Yeah, we've been
yeah,
here.
we've been here, so it's impossible that like black people haven't been doing this sort of creative work from the very, very beginning. And if you even look at like, the history of the continent and how black people have been expressing themselves, black people are inherently very expressive people, very creative people. Like that is in our DNA. So again,
Yeah.
impossible. But it for people to, say that this is the first, but it's just like again, we haven't been educated and it's not, in mainstream conversation.
Exactly. They haven't codified it. And I remember that was a big thing when I was in school. We had theater history. And so we start with the Greeks. We talk all about how they praise their gods and nothing about, Mother Africa, who has been telling stories and have found creative ways, like thinking about the drums and how we found different ways to communicate. So yes, I love that you brought that up. That just inspired me because I'm like, you're right. You are right. We've always been here. Our work has always been valid, regardless of who validates us. So, in terms of like your camera essence and the way that you use camera work, I noticed there's a lot of like vintage feel to your camera work. Do you feel like that's something that now a trademark that you're leaning into now with your work?
I don't know. I think it's kind of too early to tell if it's something that would be a trademark for me. I think I do like softer imagery and I do like naturally film does give softer imagery, but now that so I'm in a new place in my directing career, I guess you can say, where I don't know if this is something that you felt with like directing and acting, but granted, again, I've been working in the industry for like 10 plus years. And only now, after like I, got into this program, I feel like a new sense of confidence with directing in a way that's like, oh, now this is like I can do this for real as a career. And granted, again, I've been working in the media advertising industry for 10 plus years, been working with directors, whatever else have you. But getting into this program and like looking into other like directors that are signed, right? Like incredible directors who have had a successful commercial directing career, and that has allowed them to get like film work and television work and realizing like this is not something I think sometimes when you have a creative career, people look at it as very like, oh wow, like you're an actress and you're a model, what? Like, and not realizing like this is the same type of corporate job that you would have as if you were like an engineer. Like, there's something different when you pursue the creative that people look at very differently than if you have like stable job. And it only recently, like when I say recently, like in the last month, like dawned on me of like, oh, directing is my like that's my job. That is the career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so with that, I have been wanting to really, really um educate myself even more on cinematography. Like as a director, like I have like some knowledge of cinematography and like camera lenses and things like that. And with my film sheet island, like I definitely leaned more into like the decision making and like what the look and things of that would be. But it's like even with your question of like, okay, like how are black people like being lit and like shown and things like that, like I want to like increase my knowledge of that so I can make not only informed decisions generally, but also like things that would be a signature for me
Mm-hmm.
as a director and an artist. Like when we see Spike Lee and the double dolly, like we know that is a Spike Lee thing because
Signature, yes.
that's a signature. So that's something now of like, okay, like now that I'm like in this new sense of like confidence, and not that I was like insecure about my directing capabilities, but there's like a newfound like, oh, like yeah, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do this at the maximum capacity. So I want to like, and I want to master this. Like I want to have a better understanding of cinematography, um, so that I can like take my work visually to the next level. And I know certain directors also like when it comes to visuals, that may not be as of importance. Like the story may be more of
Yeah.
importance to them because I'm more of a conceptual artist. Like visuals are very, very, very important to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And your work is just, I have to take my hat off to you. Absolutely incredible. And I want to go back to what you said you had a light bulb moment. Do you mind
Yeah.
sharing what that light bulb moment was when you're like, ah, no, actually focusing on directing out because you have plenty of talent, but what brought you specifically to directing in the last month?
Yeah, so at my job I did a director's cut for this campaign that I did because I didn't really feel like um the final edit of the commercial really represented like what I wanted it to be. So me and my co-director decided to do a director's cut. I submitted said director's cut to the Shiny List, which is an organization that's based in the UK. That's all about like dismantling the barriers of marginalized directors getting into the industry. Submitted it, ended up getting into the Shiny List. And with that, you have access to like their network of partners and production companies and things of that nature. And they encourage you to reach out and say like, oh, I was in the Shiny List. So, with the opportunity of hopefully maybe you get more directing work, maybe you get signed, you whatever. So with that, I was looking into the production companies and specifically, I think it was Epoch Films. I want to say I'm not 100% sure, but they have a director named Alma Harel. And I believe she's in Israel. She's from Israel.
Hmm.
And her work, I don't know what it was, why I was so drawn to her work. Well, part of it is because I love folklore and like mysticism and surrealism and magical realism, and her work does have elements of that. And just seeing how one like her being an incredible commercial director. Then she did a whole show with Apple TV that she wrote and directed. It was only for one season, but that's still to me like a huge success. Like, and that show was incredible. I'm
Wait,
surprised
what
they
was
didn't
the show?
do it. The Lady in the Lake. I highly recommend
Oh,
everybody
I
check it out.
wanted to see that.
It is really good.
Okay, I'm gonna
It's
watch
very,
that tonight. Okay.
um, especially because again, she's not a black woman, right? And for her to be able to write this story that has this interesting like dynamic between a African American woman and a Jewish woman. I forget what decade it was, but I'm gonna say maybe in like the early 60s or 70s. And have like historic value. So I can tell there was a lot of research on that part, a lot of research from a cultural perspective, and then adding this like interesting magical elements to it. Like I just live for that kind of stuff. Like
Mhm.
give me some deep dive research and then give me some magic, and
Yeah.
I'm here for it. So seeing that, wow, she's a successful commercial director. She's worked with these brands. She directed that movie that was based off of Shia LaBeouf's life. And then she was able to have write and direct and like pitch this show that got picked up on Apple TV. She like spoke at Spike Lee's class at NYU. And it was something about seeing that. And there's a bunch of like female directors who I like love down. But I don't know if it was the time that I was in getting into the program and just seeing that and seeing like, wow, she doesn't have to be in a famous right director. It doesn't have to be on the level of like an Issa Rae or Ryan Coogler to be like, this is a successful woman that is doing incredible work. Um, and maybe some people would consider her like a mid-tier director because she's not a Ryan Coogler. But again, to me, it's like you had a show on Apple TV. That was an
That's a
incredible
win.
show. Yeah, exactly. Being on Apple TV alone, a win. And the fact that the show was incredible, and then you have this, incredible commercial career. You have this incredible movie directing career. Like that just showed me like, okay, you don't have to be. And granted, this is not saying that I don't want to be on the level of Ryan Coogler per se,
Mhm.
but you can find success
Mhm.
in this work, be paid very well, which I think is also important because sometimes it's like you do art for art's sake. You're like this like the starving artist, and it's like I also that's something I want to dismantle. Like there's an opportunity as artists, creatives, filmmakers to really like make lucrative money in this work. And so seeing someone like her at that time period was like, oh yeah, like this is
Mhm.
a job. Like she's working. This is her job and she's taking this very seriously. And it's not on something that I feel like again, especially living in LA, when people hear you're a creative director, is more just like a title that associates with like clout than actual like the work. Um, so yeah, just seeing her just like emphasize like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a job.
Right, right. And it grounds it too, because sometimes we think like, oh, well, I don't have that person's success, then I'm not
Yeah,
successful. When
exactly.
clearly you've booked projects, your bills are paid, things are good, but you feel like, oh, well, since you haven't won an Oscar or you haven't,
Right.
done this or done that, you're not reaching your full potential when in reality you are. And I many times have to remind myself, like you've worked, you've done things. Sure, there's still places to go, but to appreciate where you are now. Now going back to filling your work with natural blackness in your life, right? Of like doing research outside of school or outside of work. Do you feel like, well, I'll speak for myself first. I know as a Black woman in some leadership positions, it can be hard for people to trust my capabilities, to, you know,
Right.
really trust that I know how to lead a ship. Have you felt like you've run up against that when leading projects or working on a film creative project?
I would say for the most part, no. I would say 90% of the time, I've been in, whether it is like my corporate work or my own work, and like obviously having to bring people on and like collaborate with people. 90% of the time, I feel like I am supported and people trust me. But there have been that 10%, which again is like a small percentage, where it is kind of like, you know, whether it is like someone mansplaining things to me, and it could be a black man, right? Just mansplaining things and not being super collaborative or feeling kind of off by like another person of a different cultural background. But I'm grateful. I know that this is not everybody else's story. I know some people have been in environments where they have to continuously like fight for their voice in a room. I'm grateful that like people have been super, super supportive of like my creative path, wanting to see me win and giving me the space. Like my current job, I will say like my manager and my boss are like incredibly supportive and like are like continue to push me and are like, yo, whatever Raven says. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm the decision maker here. All right, cool.
Right. I love that. Do you do you feel like some days you're a little intimidated by those titles, or do you feel like you're in a place where you have fully stepped into like, yes, I'm director, producer, creative director, like I am these things.
Yeah, sometimes like I know when at my job we did it was like my first big campaign at my job when we did a campaign with Megan Thee Stallion, and it was like someone was like, "Oh, do you want like a pink velvet backdrop or a blue?" And like those simple like questions, realizing that like, oh, people are like you are the person to decide, no one else is making this final decision. So I had to be like, um I think like just making that decision and people be like, all right, cool, we're following Raven's lead. And that was something to be like, I think like newly stepping into, especially when you're working with the big talent, working with the big client, and you are the person that like everybody's looking towards to have like the the creative vision for something. I'm a little bit more comfortable with it now, but that was like one project in particular, especially I think that was like me stepping up into this like this level where I was like, all right, like they're looking to me, I guess pink, sure. But now I'm a little bit more comfortable, especially I think because like again, my team is like so collaborative and super supportive. So even when I'm like a little hesitant. Like I'm like, okay, like what do you guys think? And sometimes my manager will answer, and sometimes he'll push me like, I think you can figure this out. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey with like having that, like stepping into that and knowing that you are the person that everybody's like looking to.
Yeah. Feel like you said, just making game time decisions. Sometimes when you're on set and someone's bringing something to you that you just have not had the time, and you're just like, yellow. Like, yeah, let's go with the pink. The
Yeah.
pink is gonna work, you know? Um, and building, I mean, it is such a collaborative uh thing to work on a film set or to work on the shoot. And congratulations working with, Megan Thee Stallion, who's huge at this point. How was that?
It was great. I love her. She's like literally like stunning, but in all the ways. Like I feel like everybody was just so like enthralled by her presence, and she was also very chill, very funny, like very relatable. But yeah, it was a really, really big project because obviously when you're working with like an A-list talent, you have to make sure like certain things are done in a certain way, and like there's also a lot of people that need to be on set, but it also can't be overwhelming for said talent. So it's like that like balance of like we need a lot of roles, to make sure that things go right, but you don't want to overwhelm them and they're like, why is there 100 people staring at me?
Mm,
So yeah, it was really cool. It was really like having to, and I'm not like super precious about like, oh, I'm the creative lead. Like I'm not going to be like running around, and it's like no, like I'm on the ground. I'm helping where I need to help, while also realizing like people need my creative vision. It's also, I think, important whether you're a creative director or a producer or a director. I think knowing that your energy is what's like transferring over to everybody else. So it's like even if you're stressed out, you still got to be like, all right, y'all, like we're gonna have a great shoot. Like you have to keep that energy up because it's going to be infectious for everybody else. So that was something too. It's like people are going to be calling you, and I'm like helping this person, the photographer here, but then the director needed my opinion on something else, or the production designer is asking me blue or pink, and it's like you have to be able to juggle everything while also having keeping a smile on your face and being like pleasant, and then talking to the talent and being like, "Hey, Megan, so this is what we're doing today, and this is XYZ, and like we need you to slide your hand this way, and making sure that it's clear for her and." you know, yeah.
mm.
So it was a fun shoot.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. Now, in that environment, are there moments where you all may not necessarily be on the same agreement for something, and how do you work through that?
Like me and the client, like
Yeah,
who,
or you and your team, like say you're
right?
working with the director, and the director wants one thing, but you're like, well, this is what we set up and this is the original vision, but they want to try something else, and you're not
Yeah.
necessarily, yeah, on the same page.
I've recently kind of had an experience with that. I think it's complicated because I'm also a director. I like can understand both sides. I think sometimes directors, and this is something recently, even after this Shining List, that I was talking to some production companies about this. Some directors don't either they don't know or don't really care that you by the time we get to the director, there's been like rounds of creative reviews with the client, with the brand, with the agency, right? So by the time we get to you, said director, like things kind of have already been approved, set in stone. Everybody kind of has an idea of like what the creative vision and direction and the intention behind it. That is not to say that like you can't bring your own POV because usually, at least for me, when I'm hiring a director, the same way that people's like blue or pink, like I'm hiring you for your perspective. So it's like I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? I think it's the worst when you hire a director and they're like, yeah, whatever you guys want. And it's like, no, like because now you're adding more work on my plate when it's like I'm hiring you because I think that you have a great perspective, you have a great eye, you have a great XYZ.
Mhm.
But it's also to say like if we're saying that this campaign is for the summertime and you're like, this would actually look really great if we shot it in the winter. No, like,
Yeah.
it has to make sense for like what, again, we've gone through all these rounds of reviews and approvals with the client. So, I think as long as like what they're bringing to the table creatively makes sense with what we have already established,
Mhm.
um, then yeah. But to me, if it's like either A, like you don't bring anything, you just like whatever you want, I think that's not a great collaborator when it comes to like a director. And then B, if like you're like completely disregarding what we've put in place and
Mhm.
wanting to do something else, and it's like sounds like you want to make a film and this is a commercial. And we have to adhere by like KPIs and strategy and objectives, and not just make anything like it's not just art for art's sake. And I think sometimes when people directors or whoever come into the commercial world, they think, oh yeah, because it's a visual, like it is art for art's sake, and it's not. It's like the difference between like being a graphic designer and then being like an illustrator who has their work in a gallery. Like you may be doing the same skill sets in terms of like designing, but when you're a graphic designer in the brand space, like you have to adhere to certain strategies and certain like philosophies than if you were just doing a graphic piece that goes into the art world. It's just like whatever you wanted it to be.
Mm.
So yeah.
Okay, okay. Now, I remember when I was going through my advertising training, and I remember at one point in the program, we were considering me and my group was like, oh, well, trying to necessarily sell to a black audience, there was some confliction with it. Now, when you have brands come to you wanting to directly target a black audience, does that affect the way that you uh, will shoot a scene or how you would write the dialogue? Does that necessarily affect that standpoint?
Yeah. Yeah. I think if the client is like they want to speak to the Black audience or they want to speak to the Hispanic audience or whatever else have you, you do have to make the creative speak very authentically to said audience. So even like the campaign that I was saying that I submitted to Shiny List, like it was like the talent, that person is Nigerian. They grew up in the US, they like moved to the US when they were young. And everything about their brand is like unifying like the African and African American diaspora and like showing the synergies and things of that nature. So it's like for me, again, with me also being Nigerian, it's like the set design needs to make sense. And also even being very specific, just because you're Nigerian, Nigeria has all these tribes. This person is Yoruba. So if we're adding African or Nigerian things, they need to speak to the Yoruba culture. We can't just be like, oh, he's Nigerian, we're gonna put some Igbo and Ishan and XYZ. Now, this comes from I know this because I am Nigerian, but even if I wasn't Nigerian, I'm aware that every single culture, every single country has like different nuances and pockets to it.
Mhm.
So I think it's like, when a client wants to speak to the Black audience, and even especially when there's a talent, right? If it's Black audience in general, then I think it's different. But when there's like a talent, let's say the talent again is like Puerto Rican, they're like Afro-Latina, right?
Mhm.
How do you speak to the specifically what that person's background is? What does the set design look like? How does the music sound like? And again, in a way that's like not cheesy and stereotypical. So I personally try to like again do a lot of research on like said culture, the talent, ask them questions ahead of time to make sure that like I'm not just speaking for them, especially if it's a culture that's not part of my background, like really diving in and understanding like, okay, what are the elements of your culture that you are like attached to it and privy to and care about, and how can we put that in all aspects of the production, like whether it's your wardrobe, whether it's your hair, makeup, production design, sound, finding ways that like speak to to that person's culture or to
Mhm.
whatever the client is trying to target.
Just keeping it authentic for sure.
Yeah.
And now you're doing a lot of input or output, you're creating a lot, you're doing a lot. How do you personally fill up your cup?
Oh man, I think there's like one answer that's like I just do this because my brain is dead and I just need to like not think. So I'm a person, I love watching YouTube interviews. Like I love watching podcasts on YouTube, like Kiki Palmer's podcast,
Yeah.
The Diary CEO. Like I'm gonna watch any single podcast on YouTube. So I love watching that. And then I do watch like educational creative videos on YouTube. Like there's some creators who talk about like art direction and talk about different campaigns, or Studio Binder. They're like that filmmaker platform. They have a lot of great videos on YouTube, so I might watch that kind of stuff, and those things like impact how I like do my actual work. But outside of that, like I said, I love dancing. I want to get back to taking dance classes, but sometimes just dancing for yourself for fun does like replenish me. Any sort of movement, whether it's like yoga, going for a walk, I love that. Um, I love to chat, so even having like great conversations with people who I think have like great perspectives or whatever, like I usually feel really inspired by like a really good conversation. Um yeah, I would say that.
Awesome. Now, I want to pivot to She Island. First of all, this film is gorgeous. It's stunning. I recommend, please go watch this movie. Please. I absolutely love it. Well, this film takes place in the heart of the Caribbean, and it's about a mother and daughter duo that confronts a malevolent curse, erasing identities of the island's women, propelling them on a daring quest to reclaim their rich cultural heritage and triumph over the encroaching darkness. Absolutely beautiful. Just seeing that journey. Now, what inspired you to make this film?
Yeah, so kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, like I'm a person, if I'm creating something for myself, like I don't force it, like an idea has to come to me. So an idea did come to me about like wanting to do a film about Caribbean womanhood. And that was like the basis of it. Like the concept is a film about Caribbean womanhood. And then I can't remember if it was like 2022 or 2021, but I stayed in Trinidad for like a little over a month, maybe like 6 weeks, and was with my grandmother. And that was the first time I went to her like local church. And I go to Trinidad like pretty often, but I've never been to my grandma's like local church. And it was interesting seeing that the way that they like worship is very similar to like some African like worship styles, and even like the design, like yeah, the interior design of the space reminded me of like certain like African churches and like just spirituality and spiritual practices overall. So I was learning about my grandma. She's Christian, but they have a denomination in Trinidad and in the Caribbean overall. But in Trinidad, it's called spiritual baptism, and it was founded in Trinidad, but it was because it was too African, it was banned in Trinidad for a very, very long time.
Mhm.
So people who were practicing it were kind of like othered. It kind of seemed like it was like a demonized religion. I would equate it if anyone is like familiar with like I think I don't remember if it's Puerto Rican or Cuban, but like Santeria, where they utilize like the Catholic saints, but also like Yoruba like spiritual practices emerging together. Um, so yeah, just learning about my grandma's church and then wanting to like learning about like different Caribbean folklore. So I like also just during that time studied a lot of Caribbean folklore, came across the character Laja Bless, came across this like concept of like hybridity, like and it being something that people study. So all those things coming together in like my grandma's church, Laja Bless, the concept of hybridity really unpacked and made me realize the value of like showing people that Caribbean culture is this hybrid culture of African culture, European culture, um, East Asian culture, and like native culture coming together to create something new, which is the whole concept of hybridity. And that's how spiritual baptism came to be, and Santeria came to be, and just like different genres, like anything about Caribbean culture is a result of hybridity, which is like a result of colonialism,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, just like going to Trinidad, studying all those things, and then deciding like, okay, top level, this is what I want the film to be about. Then I got like a group of I think 5 writers that helped me develop the actual like story arc of it all. And yeah, that's how it kind of like from a story perspective came to be.
It was absolutely beautiful. It brought me back to going to church with my grandmother and like going to a very Southern Baptist church and and seeing those blends of it and really seeing how we have so many similarities, but s- just the way that the world is, we like to think that we're so divided or we're so different, but in reality, we really aren't.
Yeah,
Um, and
exactly.
and so, how long was the process of making that project from when you got the idea to the very end to hitting submit?
Yeah, I want to say that trip happened in 2021. The film was completed fully in 2025.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it took a little while, and I'm honestly really there was a point where I was like really impatient about it. Like I wasn't like fully at a point of like giving up, and this was in the post-production stage specifically. But realizing that even going back to what I was saying about research, like real life is also research. Like in post-production, like the length of time that it took to finish the edit, and the film was originally 20 minutes. We finished the film, then submitted to festivals, didn't get into any, and realized it's the length of the film. So then had to open the edit back up, cut it down, change things. Um, and if it wasn't for like getting into the She Made It program, because I had one of the leaders and one of the people that we met during the program like look at the film and give me notes. If it wasn't for like someone that was like dating at this time, like just a bunch of things that happened during in my personal life that inspired a lot of the changes of the film and like inspired how I thought about the film wouldn't have happened if I was like one so very like strict about my deadlines, strict about what I wanted it to be. Um, yeah, so it really taught me just like patience with filmmaking, specifically in the post-production process. I think like the pre-production, creative development, like while things took a little long, it wasn't as crazy as post-production. Um, but I think there was a level of like, okay, we need to like hit certain deadlines, especially we did crowdfunding. So it was like, okay, no, we have to hit a certain deadline to make a certain amount of money to go into production. But yeah, there was a lot of like grace and patience and trusting the process when it came to post-production that I benefited in the way that the film ended up turning out.
hmm It's filmmaking is such a lengthy process. And sometimes hearing it, I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like filmmaking can take years,
Yeah.
on top of like you said, dealing with the personal life and all these influence and how that can influence the filmmaking. What was it like putting together your cast and crew? because the costumes were excellent, the dancing was excellent, all of that. I'm like, how did she get? I'm like, she lives in the States. How did she get all that?
Um, One, Trinidad has, so we shot it in Trinidad. It's the film is supposed to be Pan-Caribbean, but we actually shot it in Trinidad. Um, I think one thing it was that was really, really important to me was like for people to understand that the Caribbean does have one incredibly talented artist, and has a robust production um landscape and ecosystem. Because traditionally when people do films or shows about the Caribbean, and typically cast people in the UK or the US. Um, and they bring over their entire production crew or majority of their production crew from the US or the UK to the Caribbean. So I did not want to do that to be able to showcase that the Caribbean can produce a high quality production without needing resources fully from the US. So that was like a major, major like intention on my part. Trinidad has a local casting network. So I utilized them to help with casting. And then we just did like virtual sessions. So I had people, the film is, as you know, is majority performance. There's no actual dialogue. So it was a lot of people having to like interpret movement. We gave them a video of like some choreography that they did have to like interpret and perform and send videos of. So that was part of the casting process. In terms of the crew, a lot of it's like, so for me, this is something that I learned with my like corporate career and like also with me just being very like hands-on. Like I make a deck for everything. Some people love it, some people like she got way too many decks, but majority of people appreciate it. So with that, I'm very, very specific on like what I want the wardrobe to be, what I want the sound to be, what I want hair and makeup to be. There's a deck for every single department. Cinematography, you got a deck too. Everybody got a deck about what this project is. And it's like laddering it like, okay, we're grounding it on the concept, the intention, the strategy, and now here's like the creative. Like this is what the wardrobe is supposed to be so that you can understand I'm not coming up with like wardrobe ideas just because I think things are cute. It ladders back up to the intention and the strategy here. So that's a lot of like coming from like my corporate background. Um, so with that, it's like having conversations with different stylists and costume designers locally. There was a designer that we actually wanted to bring from Brazil. It didn't end up working out, but I love her work. By having these conversations with different department heads locally, seeing who makes sense from a chemistry perspective and who understands like what the intention is. And like usually, again, when people get these decks that are so specific, it helps them do a better job because it's not like they're trying to figure out, okay, what does this director want? It's like, you know exactly what I want. And then you're able to elevate it. Like again, it's going back to what we were saying earlier with the director, like I trust your perspective. So it's like this is what I'm saying I want. Now I want you to plus it up, take it up 10 levels based on what I've already set as a foundation. So it was a great collaborative process because people understood what I wanted. And because I come from a dance background, it's like I can be like, okay, I want this genre of dance. I want these people to do these kinds of things. And like I kind of worked a lot of like I've done styling before, so it's like I know how certain things should be and are able to communicate with different departments about that. The department that I know the least is camera, which is why I want to like learn more about it. But so yeah.
It was so clear. You could see, like, oh, this girl had a vision. It was
Thank you.
executed for sure. Um, Going back to like the choreography and the movement language of the film, why was it important for you to have this film primarily take place using dance as communication and as language?
Yeah, so I think that it just becomes natural to me. It wasn't like I was intending on like making a film that didn't have dance, but most of my projects have some, especially my personal work, have some level of movement. So it's just an area that I'm like most comfortable in. And honestly, like this is my version of trying to do something more narrative. Because like I said, I'm a more of a like conceptual artist. So I like there's certain things that usually is left up to like interpretation to a degree.
Mhm.
Um, so this was like, okay, let me like try to get into my narrative bag, but also do it in a way that feels authentic to me. So even going back to like your earlier question about like my style, even though I haven't figured out like my, let's say like cinematography style, but I do think like movement and like adornment, um, and like whether it's surrealism or magical realism, are like strong elements of like my work. So yeah, so it's just a natural, and also just thinking about like culture, like dance, especially culture of the diaspora. Dance and movement is a big part of like of our culture. So it almost would feel like to me and for like the type of work that I do would feel like a disservice to not showcase movement when movement is a lot of the ways in which we communicate. Like just thinking about like how certain stories were passed down, like certain dance movements and body movements communicated something so that like this enslaved Africans knew how to do certain things or kept certain traditions going or like communicate like this maybe a slave master was coming soon and they did a certain movement or they made a certain sound. That communicate certain things to the other enslaved Africans. So yeah, it was just also honoring that as like a form of communication that we've been doing like historically.
Yeah, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, what do you want audiences to take away from this film? We talked about, people understanding the Caribbean having a wealth of talent, which is evident. What else would
Mhm.
you say you want people to take away when they watch the film?
I think one thing is like understanding the for those who are not Caribbean, right? And even for those who are not Black, but definitely for those who are not Caribbean, understanding that Caribbean culture is not this like hypersexual culture. I think when people think about Caribbean culture, specifically Carnival, and look at it as this like hypersexual thing. Like if you are like not of Caribbean descent and you go to Carnival, people are like, oh, make sure that you're not doing XYZ, while now you taking somebody. It's like it's this weird like social commentary like that is reducing the essence of what Carnival is. Um, so wanting to showcase like Carnival it has a sense of like liberation and freedom. That's why like when the curse is lifted on the island, there's a carnivalesque celebration. That's just for them to like start dancing and like working up themselves. It's to showcase like this is how Caribbean people liberate themselves. This what Carnival does for them is very, very, very freeing. And it has like history that goes back to like slave times. Like a lot of like early carnival was a way for like during I think some Caribbean islands, like it was a day where like when maybe like the colonizers allowed them to express themselves, right? And sometimes they would dress up as a colonizer. So there's certain costuming that they would look like they are like pretending to be like a French person or a British person, depending on like what country colonized them or whatever else have you. So really just showcasing to people that Caribbean culture is not this like hypersexual culture. There's a lot of like nuance into Carnival, and there's also like interesting dichotomy in the Caribbean because you do have like Carnival and like even like in Jamaica dance hall that may be more sexual, but also like there's elements of like Jamaican culture that are very rigid and very like Christian. Like don't play. They don't play. And other Caribbean islands the same thing. So there's like dichotomy of like, yeah, you can be very free, you can dress a certain way in Caribbean culture, but also there's a certain element of like you going to church and your hair is wrapped. You have to wear a long skirt. Like there. So yeah, just showcasing like all I think it was important to share that. Um and I think the other thing that I just want people to take away, specifically for people of the diaspora, is like the nuances of similarities and differences that exist within the diaspora. Like the fact that you said it reminded you of like your southern like churches. It's like those are the things that like those are the types of conversations that I want to to have because there are similarities, but there are also like nuanced differences that are also okay. Like, I think sometimes like I'm not into the diaspora wars. So it's like the stuff that I make is like for people to see how we're similar and then to respect the differences because the differences also is what makes us unique and makes, you know, this person Caribbean versus Black American versus Afro-Latina versus African. So being able to celebrate that and like create a space for like conversation around that.
Love that. And what advice would you give to someone that's interested in being a creative director, a filmmaker, producer?
Um I would give different advice for each. So I think for a creative director, I think it's important to understand the like holistic picture of like what you're trying to create outside of like so let's say you're a creative director for a campaign. Like it's more than just the video thing that you're putting out. Like how does photography support it? How does the copy support it? How does like everything support everything for the entire vision? And understanding, especially if you're working as a creative director alongside a director, right? Like you're here to support, work collaboratively with the directors to help elevate whatever their vision is. So it's really collaborative role with the director, at least for me. Um, for director, the even for both creative director and director, I think it's really, really important to understand what your creative perspective is and your creative POV, because that's going to differentiate you from from the other directors, from the other creative directors that are in the market. So even going back to like the Petra Collins example earlier, it's like I realized, oh, people are hiring her because of her perspective and her style, and that's how she's getting these jobs. So in order for a director, creative director to get these creative jobs, it's like you don't want to be a director and creative director that can do anything, right? Like, yeah, I can do a commercial for Nike, and I can do a car commercial, and I can do. It's like, okay, what is your niche? What makes you like stand out in your niche? What is your perspective on certain things? Like I know Khalil Joseph, when he was doing his recent press tour for Black News, like he was talking a lot about perspective, and it's something that you hone in over time. So I also want people to give themselves like grace and patience with that. Like it's not like you're gonna wake up one day and like no. So I would just say keep that at the forefront. As a creative director and a director, specifically with a director, it's knowing that you are the leader on set, like people are going to be looking to you for a lot of the answers to things. And this doesn't mean that you have to like be a know-it-all, right? But like again, this goes back to having a perspective, um, and having a voice and trusting your voice. And even when you are unsure, trusting the people that you brought on, because when you're a director, you're bringing in your DP, you're bringing in your stylist or whatever, trusting them, so that you're making the best decision. Um, and then for a producer, I think the biggest thing for a producer is knowing that you're there to support the creative and championing the creative. Obviously, you do have like, other things, whether it's like you have um, the client that you have to like manage or the budget or if you're doing for like something for a network, you have like the network KPIs and certain things that you have to like adhere to. But I think a great producer at the end of the day is able to balance all of the things of like balancing what the network wants, balancing what the production company wants, balancing what the brand wants, but also like ensuring that you're getting the best creative possible and like working with your directors to be like, okay, what is a non-negotiable for you? What is super important for you? Like, let's say the client is like, all right, we don't like the color blue because that's our competitor's color. Okay, cool. So you can't do that. How can you still tell this story without utilizing blue? Like working with your creative team, and like managing those things and having that balance. So I think that's super, super important for a producer and being communicative. All of those roles, you have to be, if you can't communicate your idea to people, through a deck, through a call, pitching your idea, then it's going to be really, really hard for you. So any of those roles, being super communicative, putting your ideas down on paper, not assuming that you understand what you want to do because like people can't read minds. So like over communicating what your idea is, what your intention is, and why you're doing said thing.
Amazing. And what's next for you?
What's next? We're just doing a lot with She Island. We're trying to do some programming in New York and LA for Caribbean Heritage Month, which is in June. So be on the lookout for that. I also, another project that I have is called Last Night I Cried, which is a project that high level is around like heartbreak and normalizing heartbreak and creating a safe space for women and women of color. To talk about heartbreak, and again to normalize it. So there's a short like experimental docu film that I have for that. That is like a three-panel film, but we adapted based on like where it's being displayed. Photography. Um, I've done an exhibition for it, and then I've done cultural programming for it in the Bronx Museum last year, actually. And now we have what I'm calling like living art objects. So the idea is like, especially if you experience the exhibition or any of the in real life programming and like really was able to like feel the healing energy in those spaces, being able to take that energy home with you through our healing journals,
Mhm.
which allows people to like, write out and there's like specific prompts to help them on their healing journey. And then we have a healing blanket. Sometimes you need something very tactile to keep you cozy and warm and allow you to just facilitate a space for healing. So those are the two things right now that I'm like really pushing, selling those objects for people to just help them cultivate a space of healing in their own homes. And even if it's like some people it solves the healing problem for them, and some people it solves for having like intentional art pieces in their home. So like the blanket is a tapestry that you can hang up on your wall. I've exhibited in certain art galleries as well as an art piece in itself. So if you're looking for just more intentional design in your home, the tapestry allows for that. Even if you don't want to, cuddle with it, you can have it as an art piece in your home. And similarly, with the journal. Both of these are like illustrative designs off of the photography that I have for this project. So, the journal also operates as like a nice visual piece that you can have on like your bookshelf, your coffee table, all the things.
Love it. And where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram, Raven Charisse. That's RavenCharisse. I'm kind of on TikTok, but you're not gonna really find much about me on TikTok. And then for She Island, we are on Instagram, She Island underscore film on Instagram and TikTok, where that's I would say TikTok for the film is where we're also quite active. My website is ravenirabor.com. That's RavenIrabor.com. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn. I feel like some creatives like sleep on LinkedIn as a platform, but the people that are hiring you, the producers, the brand managers, the creative directors at to work at Nike, Adidas, Netflix, whatever, they're on LinkedIn. So be on
Mhm.
LinkedIn. So I'm also on LinkedIn. So you can find me there, Raven Irabor.
All right. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Crafted It Creative, and I will see you in the next episode.